In this video, I'm going to take the complex home buying process and break it down into an easy to understand algorithm. It's going to be just like ACLS, PALS, or CPR classes you may have had in the past. I'll be taking the entire process and breaking it down into 7 simple phases. Stay tuned, it's Steve Dooley. Hey, it's Steve Dooley with First Responder Real Estate, where we provide our first responder personnel with important home buying tactics and strategies that they can use. Before we talk about buying a home, we need to take a step back a bit. We need to realize that buying a home isn't exactly like just going to the store and buying a TV. Well, maybe some of you finance TVs, but that's a topic for another discussion. But seriously though, buying a home for most of us is a big decision. One that requires saving money over time, careful planning, home searching, and working on our finances, just to name a few of the things that go on. And when many people start thinking about all this stuff, they can get easily overwhelmed. Look, it's just like when you were a brand new probie at work. Everything was new to you, and much of it seemed like a daunting task at the time. But your awesome academy instructor took the big evolution and broke it down into smaller bite-sized chunks. That way, you were able to get the job done. And now, you can don your SCBA in your sleep at 0200 hours. Okay, so allow me to become your academy instructor for home buying. I'm going to take this big evolution of buying a home and I'm going to break it down into small, easy phases that you can do one step at a time. So let's start breaking this down into those phases. And phase number 1 is getting pre-qualified for your loan. Now, the only time you won't need to get pre-qualified is if you're paying cash. And let's face it, most of us first responders aren't exactly a bunch of Donald Trumps running around out there. So the majority of us are going to be doing some financing. And in order to do that, we need to get pre-qualified. Also, during this phase, you're going to want to be saving as much cash as you can for down payments and other fees associated with the transaction. Now we'll move on to the next phase of the home buying process. Phase 2 is beginning your home search and going and viewing properties. If you haven't done so already by now, this is the time when you'll want to hire a great realtor, like myself. Your real estate professional will help you refine your home search criteria, and they'll help you go see the actual houses in person. Okay, moving on to the next phase in the process. This is where it gets exciting. Phase 3 is placing offers. There are many nuances to crafting the perfect offer, and they're all very case dependent. Several factors go into that, such as the amount of financing you have, how much money you have to put down, and exactly how bad do you really want the property. My advice would be to work closely with your agent to craft a very competitive offer that'll also keep you within your budget. Nobody wants to be house broke. Once we get our offer accepted, we move into phase number 4, the inspection period. A lot of stuff happens during this time, and the standard inspection period is 10 days. But your agent can write in another amount of days. I typically go for 12, just in case we have trouble getting inspectors out or scheduling roofers or any other contractors that we need to come look at the property. They can write these different days into your contract, and it probably varies from state to state. Your inspection period begins on the next calendar day following the date of contract acceptance. And the first thing that needs to happen is that your earnest money is due to the title company at this time. It's typically the next business day, so don't worry if your contract gets accepted on a Saturday. You have probably till Monday to pay the money to the title company. Typically, this money can be paid via personal check, cashier's check, or wire transfer. The industry standard for the amount of the earnest money is usually 1% of the purchase price. But that also can vary, depending on your local market. Definitely talk to your realtor on what they say would be a good amount for earnest money. Obviously, the more money you put down, that makes your offer a little bit stronger, but you also risk losing that money in the event something goes sideways with the deal. But if you're just getting started, figuring 1% is a good benchmark. Once the title company receives that money, you have now officially opened escrow. The next thing we're going to talk about during the inspection period is actually getting those inspections done. The standard inspections I recommend are a general home inspection and a roof inspection. Those are kind of the minimums. In Arizona, if you're doing any kind of financing, The lenders also require a termite inspection. And out here, that's usually lumped in with the general. So it depends. The cost of the general inspection is usually around $400 to $500. That is due at the time of service, and that is non-refundable cost as well. In our market, you can get a roofer to come out and do a free inspection or a free estimate, and that's usually how they try to get business. So that's why they'll do the inspections for free. I would also talk with your agent and see about maybe ordering an HVAC or a sewer scope or any additional inspections. The way I typically work it is I wait till the general comes back, and if something is really bad on one of those, for an example, an AC, they say there's a lot of repairs needed, I'll have the HVAC contractor come out and put an estimate together. And that usually runs, $50 to $100, per additional inspection. But if you're going to ask for some of those bigger ticket items for the seller to fix, then it's good to have an estimate so that they know what the associated costs will be to get that job done. Plus, you're going to have a licensed contractor doing the work, so you know it's done right. Once all the home inspections are completed, you and your realtor will put together a repair request list and submit it to the seller. Just remember that this is a repair request. The seller is not obligated to make any repairs on the home. But that being said, if the seller elects to not make all of the repairs requested, you as a buyer do have the option to back out of the deal and get your earnest money refunded in full. Now, of course, you won't get reimbursed for the cost of the actual inspections themselves. So you would be out that. Congrats! You've reached a major milestone on the home buying journey. Okay, so now we can kind of take a deep breath. So what's next? Now we'll move into phase 5, which is the home appraisal. In this phase, you're going to be working closely with your lender. If you haven't submitted all of your loan documents that they requested, such as pay stubs and things like that, this is the time when you're going to be making that happen. All these docs need to get turned in for your final loan approval. Your lender will handle scheduling the appraisal, so there's nothing for you to do on that end. There is an associated fee for the appraisal. Typically, it's $500 to $600. The appraisal fee is normally covered by the buyer, but in some cases, it can be done by the seller as well. It can either be negotiated in the sales price or in the form of some seller concessions in the time of the purchase contract and the offer. It's always good policy to have the cash on hand, though, in the event that you have to come out of pocket for it. Just to recap, if you're adding up out-of-pocket costs, the earnest money, the home inspection, and the appraisal fee, you got $1,000 for earnest, $500 roughly for home inspections, and roughly $500 to $600 for appraisal. So if you have the number around $2,000 in your head plus your down payment, then that's just kind of a good ballpark figure. So what happens if the appraisal comes in low? Well, there are a few different outcomes that can happen. Let's take an example of a $200,000 purchase price where the appraisal comes in at $195,000. Option number 1 is simply that the seller would drop the price to $195,000 and all will be good. Sellers typically don't like this because they just lost $5,000 on the sale. Option number 2, if the seller elects to not drop the price, then the buyer could come up with the additional cash, the difference between $195,000 and $200,000 to make up the difference. But that means you'd have to come up with another $5,000 in cash. So not an ideal scenario for our buyer. Option number 3 is it can be negotiated where the seller drops the price some and the buyer comes up with some cash. So example, the seller drops the price $3,000, the buyer comes up with $2,000 more to make up the difference. It's also really important to note that if the home doesn't appraise for full asking price, the buyer can bail out of the deal without question and receive all of his earnest money back. Once we get past the appraisal, we'll move into the next phase number 6, which is our final walkthrough and signing. The final walkthrough is typically done a few days prior to close. And in Arizona, under our contract, the sellers are required to have all the repair work done 3 days prior to close. So that's right around the time when we'll do the final walk. The purpose of the final walk is simply to let the buyers walk through the property one last time before closing. We're going to make sure all the repairs were done properly and that the property is in the same condition as when we first got into contract. Sometimes things happen like trees fall in the house, put a hole in it, windows get broke, squatters come and party. Those are like real things that actually happen. So final walk is a good idea to do. The second part of this phase is that we're going to get our signing appointment done. So the lender will be sending you the loan documents to review and go over. And then once you approve of them, then the lender will send those back to the title company. Once the title receives those documents, then your realtor will schedule an appointment with title where you'll go in and sign all the paperwork. It's a good idea to do this one day prior to close if your lender can get all the documents to title in time. Oh, one last thing I almost forgot. During these last few days leading up to closing, you're going to want to start getting your utilities set up. Get your water, gas, electric, all those things set up with those companies and get them in your name starting on the day of close. The sellers are not obligated to leave the utilities on past the close of escrow date. And also, if you haven't started already, you're going to want to start making arrangements for your move too. Yes, yes, yes. We're almost to the finish line, guys. Stick with me. Welcome to closing day. We have finally arrived at our last and final phase. Phase number 7 is closing. Now, I mentioned in phase 6 that I like to sign one day prior to our closing day. If we sign the day before, the loan typically will fund and the money will be sent to title that morning on closing day. Once title receives the loan funds, then they will actually draw up the deed and send it to the county to be recorded. And once the deed is recorded with the county, then and only then, you'll get your keys. Congratulations on your new home purchase. While the home buying process can seem daunting at first, this algorithm I've just provided you should break it down into more manageable steps. Steps you can take on one part at a time so you don't get so overwhelmed. And ideally, you'd be working with an awesome realtor like this guy who can guide you through this process step by step as well. While there are a lot of moving parts in the home buying process, at least now you have this algorithm to follow. But there are a lot of details to each of these phases that we've covered today. And perhaps this video raised some questions that you may not have even thought about yet. In either case, keep watching the videos in this series because I'll be diving deeper in each one of these phases I've discussed today and taking a further look. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.